After almost 40 years of separation, an elephant named Boo was on the verge of reuniting with the man who had nurtured him during his early years. This heartwarming reunion was something that many would have deemed impossible. What transpired next was sure to touch even the most stoic of hearts. Daniel Carter stood at the edge of Greenfield Sanctuary, an old photograph trembling in his weathered hands. "Are you sure it's him?" he whispered, studying the soulful eyes of the young elephant captured in the faded image. At 63, his return to Africa after nearly 40 years felt surreal, like stepping into a half-remembered dream. The news that had brought him here seemed almost impossible. An elderly elephant matching Boo's description had wandered back to the sanctuary. Daniel's mind drifted back to his days as a young wildlife researcher, when a mischievous orphaned calf had become his constant companion. They'd spent countless hours together until Boo's relocation to another reserve, after which Daniel had lost all contact. 39 years of silence followed, filled with questions about the fate of his remarkable friend. Sarah, a ranger whose presence eerily echoed her father Isaac's mannerisms, greeted Daniel with knowing eyes. "Dad's stories about you and Boo were legendary around here," she said warmly, though her smile carried a hint of gentle caution. As they walked the sanctuary grounds, Daniel shared tales of his time with Boo, each memory as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. "He had this way of finding me," Daniel recalled, his voice soft with remembrance. "No matter where I hid during our games among the trees, he always knew." Sarah listened with compassionate attention, but her response carried the weight of experience. 4 decades is a long time, Daniel," she advised carefully. "Even with their remarkable memories, elephants change, just as we do." Yet Daniel clung to hope, unable to dismiss the special connection he'd shared with Boo, the playful glances, the distinctive trumpeting responses to his voice, the countless small moments that had bound them together. According to Sarah, Boo had appeared at the reserve about a year ago, now one of their eldest residents. While he seemed to recognize certain locations, he hadn't shown the kind of personal recognition Daniel yearned to find. "I understand if he doesn't remember," Daniel said quietly, "but I need to see him, to know he's found his way." The sanctuary had transformed during his absence, expanding into a sprawling reserve that hosted researchers, tourists, and educational groups. As Daniel walked familiar paths now widened by time, memories surfaced like bubbles in still water. He paused by the old ranger's quarters, smiling as he remembered Boo's notorious banana heist from the kitchen. Nearby, young elephants played in training pens, their joyful antics echoing those of the spirited calf he'd once known so well. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Sarah led Daniel to a surprise reunion with Isaac, who had emerged from retirement upon hearing of Daniel's return. Though time had etched deep lines in Isaac's face, his eyes still sparkled with the same fierce passion for wildlife that Daniel remembered. Their embrace spoke volumes. They weren't just former colleagues, but kindred spirits who had shared a profound connection with the natural world. "Like old times, eh, Dan?" Isaac said warmly, patting his back. As they walked the sanctuary's perimeter, discussing decades of changes, Daniel felt anticipation and anxiety coiling inside him. He wondered if the playful spirit he remembered in Boo had survived the years. Isaac's voice grew gentle. "He's changed, Daniel. The years have given him wisdom, but they've also made him more distant. The Boo you knew." He let the words trail off, but Daniel held fast to his hope, clutching the old photograph like a talisman. The next day's elephant viewing event drew an unexpectedly large crowd. Families with excited children, photographers with massive lenses, and journalists scribbling in notepads created a buzz of anticipation. Daniel's heart thundered as he searched the gathering elephants until suddenly, there he was. Boo moved with a regal grace that belied his massive frame. His tusks had grown magnificent and curved, his skin weathered by decades, but there was something in his movement that Daniel instantly recognized. For one electric moment, Boo's gaze seemed to sweep across the crowd and settle on Daniel. Though fleeting, it sent a jolt through him. Sarah, manning her post at the field's edge, listened intently when Daniel described the moment, suggesting he approach after the crowds dispersed. As the last visitors drifted away, Daniel moved forward with measured steps, his voice trembling as he called out, "Boo! It's me, remember?" The elephant's ears twitched at the sound, but gave no clear sign of recognition. In the growing quiet, with only a few staff members remaining, Daniel felt his hope beginning to fade. Then something extraordinary happened. Another elephant gently bumped Boo's side, and he responded with a low rumble, his trunk lifting slightly toward Daniel. Sarah, watching intently from afar, noticed the subtle interaction and motioned for Daniel to move closer. As he took that careful step forward, Boo's demeanor shifted dramatically. His ears fanned out, and with surprising speed, he moved toward Daniel. Sarah, watching intently from afar, noticed the subtle interaction and motioned for Daniel to move closer. As he took that careful step forward, Boo's demeanor shifted dramatically. His ears fanned out, and with surprising speed, he moved toward Daniel. The atmosphere crackled with sudden tension as Daniel stood frozen in place. Before anyone could react, Boo's trunk wrapped around Daniel's waist, lifting him effortlessly into the air. Gasps erupted from the remaining onlookers, and sanctuary staff tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. Suspended in the air, Daniel stared into Boo's eyes, searching for any hint of the young elephant he'd known. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to remain calm, even as adrenaline coursed through his body. For several endless seconds, time seemed to stop. Then, with unexpected gentleness, Boo lowered him carefully back to the ground. The collective tension dissolved as Daniel released a shaky breath. Sarah rushed to his side, her face etched with concern. "Are you all right? What just happened?" "I think he knows," Daniel whispered, wonder threading through his voice. "There's something in his eyes, like he's remembering." Boo took a tentative step backward, his trunk extending toward Daniel with an almost hesitant curiosity, as if piecing together a long-forgotten memory. Daniel moved closer, his fingers brushing against the elephant's weathered skin. "Buh," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I never forgot about you." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes as he realized that despite the passage of 4 decades, some deep recognition still lingered between them. Boo's initial uncertainty melted into familiarity, like a dusty photograph slowly coming into focus. The elephant's trunk traced the air around Daniel's face with deliberate care, while onlookers stood in reverent silence, witnessing the rekindling of a bond that had transcended time. A low, rumbling purr emerged from Boo, the same sound Daniel remembered from their shared past when his young charge would nuzzle against him. The small crowd murmured softly, many wiping away tears at this raw display of connection between man and beast. "I've never seen him interact with anyone like this," Sarah whispered, her camera clicking quietly. "He really does remember you." "He does," Daniel replied, joy and relief flooding his voice. "This isn't coincidence. My old friend is still in there." Boo pressed his trunk gently against Daniel's chest in an unmistakable gesture of recognition, then stepped back and raised his trunk skyward, letting out a triumphant trumpet call, as if announcing to the world that something precious, once lost, had been found again. The sanctuary staff lingered, allowing Daniel more time with Boo, hoping to see their connection deepen. Yet they remained cautious, aware that Boo's years in the wild had changed him. They suggested testing the waters with some of their old routines, curious to see if those memories too had endured. Daniel recalled a cherished game from their past, a simple hide-and-seek ritual that had delighted Boo as a young calf. With hope kindling in his chest, he headed toward a nearby wooded area of the reserve, Boo trailing at a watchful distance. Behind a massive baobab tree, Daniel crouched, his heart racing as he peeked out to observe Boo's reaction. The elephant paused, taking in the familiar scenario. His trunk swayed gently as he searched the area, echoing his behavior from decades past. When he found Daniel, there was a moment of hesitation before approaching, a small victory that hinted at deeper memories stirring. Yet each repetition of the game revealed changes in Boo. His gaze frequently drifted toward the open plains, marking longer pauses that spoke of years spent with wild herds. Sarah noticed Boo's growing restlessness from her observation point. "Daniel," she called softly, "perhaps we should give him some space. It's been an overwhelming day." "Just one more try," Daniel replied, his voice determined. He reached into his backpack and withdrew an old bell, once used to signal playtime during Boo's training. The clear tone rang out across the afternoon air. Boo froze, his ears fanning wide to catch the sound. Daniel held his breath, knowing these next moments were crucial. Slowly, deliberately, Boo stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the bell. His trunk reached out to touch it, and Daniel's heart soared. Gently stroking the extended trunk, he continued ringing the bell at intervals, watching as the familiar sound seemed to awaken something in Boo's memory. Then came an extraordinary moment. Boo knelt down and rested his massive head against Daniel's chest, a gesture of profound trust that left the watching staff in awe. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes at the display of such vulnerability from the usually reserved elephant. The peaceful scene was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of a younger, more aggressive male elephant. Known for challenging older bulls, he approached with an aggressive trumpet, his posture radiating hostility. Staff members moved quickly to intervene, but before they could act, Boo's demeanor transformed. Rising to his full height, he positioned himself between Daniel and the approaching bull, his ears flaring in clear warning. The younger elephant, facing this display of protective authority, eventually backed down. When the threat passed, Boo returned to Daniel, wrapping his trunk gently around his arm as if to ensure he was unharmed. In that moment, Daniel felt transported back to his years as a young researcher, when everything felt new and magical. The depth of Boo's memory, spanning nearly 4 decades, and the emotion he displayed seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet here they were, their bond transcending time and separation in ways that defied explanation.